Can you tell me the difference between this piece of fabric and this? Or the difference between this chain and this? Or the difference of this 3D model and this? Polycount is a topic which is as old as human history. In this video I will show you how you can optimize your 3D models for animation, rendering and games, and do some benchmarks to answer the question, does the polycount really matter nowadays? First off, when we talk about the polycount, we actually mean the number of triangles a model consists of. The more complex your model is, the more triangles it needs to look the way it's supposed to look. Let's look at some examples in the modern industry for animation and gaming. League of Legends is a game which, by the looks of it, is supposed to even run on your old Game Boy. The mobs have barely 2000 polys per unit, which could be important when you consider that you can have many of them simultaneously on the screen. An example of a hero is Nami, with 9000 polys on the desktop version and about 2500 on the mobile version. Final Fantasy has always been known for its good graphics on its characters. In Final Fantasy 15, the poly count of a character is about 100,000. Just the hair takes about 20k. Another great example is Kratos from God of War, which has about 80,000 triangles with about 32k for just his face. So why is there such a difference? There are too many factors, starting with marketing and monetization strategy, for example free-to-play versus buy once, target audience, competitive versus single player, and so on. But if you just look at the type of game, well, first off, these games have a complete different visual style. While League of Legends is stylized, looking like a comic book for kids, God of War and Final Fantasy go more in the direction of realism. Second, in games like God of War, you only see a handful of characters in the scene at once. While in League of Legends you can have situations where all 10 heroes banging each other and many monsters at once, which all adds up on the poly count of the scene. Imagine a tower defense game with Kratos as the spawned monsters. The poly count will skyrocket and only rich kids will be able to afford a system to play it. So what do we learn from this? The poly count is different for each genre, platform, the visual style and the camera view. The closer the camera, the more details you see, the fewer objects you see at the time, the more polys your model can have. But not only in gaming but also animation, the poly count plays an important role. Animating with a high poly count can get pretty expensive, since you need a system that runs smooth in order to create the best animations. And as you know, graphic card prices are over the top since everyone started mining bitcoins. So you want a low poly count for animation, but you also want to render your animations with as much detail as possible. So how is this possible? We shall see. Let's get practical. When modeling in Blender, you can see the count of your triangles in the bottom right corner. Or if not, right-click on the bar and select Show Scene Statistics. Optimizing your poly count comes down to one thing. Retopologize your mesh with as little polys as you need, while using textures to fake the details. Faking details with textures is done through baking, which can be done in Blender, Substance Painter and other texturing software. What happens here is that you create different texture maps like normals, height maps, curvature, to tell your graphics card how light rays should be processed. Combine this with color and contrast and you create an illusion of depth and detail. Let's look at some examples on how to save polys. When you look at those tree trunks, can you tell me which one is more round? The left one looks more round, even if the cylinder shape consists of just half as much corners. The poly count of some geometries can skyrocket, even if you make it with as little polys as possible. Look at this chain for example. It is impossible to lower the poly count on each individual element, otherwise you will break the form. This chain has around 30,000 polys and looks very edgy. With a subdivision modifier it is not as edgy but has about 120,000 polys. And since this chain is not supposed to be looked at close distance, this is a waste of resources. You can achieve a similar result by just using a plane and the alpha channel of your textures. The same technique is used for plants, grass, even hair and feathers. When you retopologize your model, you probably do it part by part, like in this example. I have a part for the metal, one for the handle, and even each leather wrapping is a single part. But what you also can do is just retopologize it as one part and let textures make it appear as individual. You can also leave out details like these bubbles here, or the shape of this horse. From the distance it is almost not visible that there is no shape, but textures. When animating, you have to rely on a low poly count, otherwise you will face a very low frame rate, which leads to bad animations. Here you can see the frame rate when I want to animate using my rendering details. What you can do is use a multi-resolution modifier where the details are baked into the higher levels of subdivision for rendering, while animating with a subdivision level of 0. This has to be considered while retopologizing your model, since this is the moment you transfer your details from your high poly mesh to the low one. Blender even has a function to turn this on globally when you go to your render properties, turn on simplify and set the max divisions to a low number. Time for some benchmarks. I've created a simple scene in Unity engine and a script that spawns random axes in the air when I press space. Let's see how our low poly model compares to the high poly one. By the way, you can see the frame rate here and the poly count here. Okay, our frame rate seems pretty stable after about 500 objects. Now reaching 1000, still nothing happened. Right, that's enough, all frames are capped at 60. Now the high poly version. After about 100 objects we already reached the poly count of our low poly test with 1300 objects. With about 40 million polys we can finally see some frame rate drop. Let's continue until we reach about 100 million polys. 14 frames per second. So what is our conclusion? The poly count does matter, but not as much as you probably thought. How much it matters depends on the platform, since your mobile phone, for example, doesn't have a NVIDIA GTX 3080 built in. So design and model your objects with as many polys as you need to look good, but not more.